Hi everyone, welcome to The Solutionist, which is an initiative by Unacademy. So we are here to help you ace your next exam, and my name is Ace Sethi. I'm a verified educator on Unacademy, and I have cleared all major entrance exams of India which is related to chemistry like IIT JAM, GATE, NET, DRDO, BARC, TIFR, right? So today we are going to solve the December 2018 question paper, right? Part C, not Part C, basically the set C, and we'll be solving section A, B, C, like the aptitude section, the section B, and section C, which carries 2 and 4 marks respectively. And so we'll try to basically capture what exactly how we have to solve the question, right? How exactly we have to approach the paper rather than giving you the solutions to the answers, because the solutions to the answers are already available on the free platform on Unacademy. But over here we are going to discuss the strategy and how you have to choose the questions. So maybe that can help you out in your next exam, right? And I always keep these tissues with me because sometimes I sweat a lot in the exams. So I have kept that here as well so that we get a real examination feel, right? So let's begin. Now, generally, I like to start with the section C because it carries 4 marks and it has the highest weightage, right? So you should be fresh. So whenever you enter the examination hall and you go for the exam, you should always go for section C. That's what I believe in. So we'll start with section C, all right? So let's move to section C. Let's move to section C quickly. It starts from question number 60, right? So, yeah. So part C, section C, basically, we'll start with the first question, that is the question from inorganic chemistry. Now you can choose whichever you like, right? If generally I recommend doing 2 topics, like either physical chemistry or inorganic or organic, any 2 topics in a detailed manner. So you can start with the one which you are more confident with, right? Because that will give you the advantage and the confidence. If you begin with a higher confidence, then you can obviously do well in the exam, right? So you can start with any one in the part C section, either physical chemistry, organic and inorganic, right? We'll go along with the questions itself. So the first question is based on hydroformylation reaction, right? So the question, what is the question exactly saying? So the question says that hydroformylation of one propene with this rhodium catalyst leads to linear and branched formilated products. Okay, so the linear hydroformylated product is formed with high selectivity when L in the rhodium is. So we have to find which ligand out of these 4 options is the correct ligand, right? So first of all, it's saying that which leads to linear hydroformylated product. So the major product should be linear in nature. This is the hint in the question, right? So the linear product out of all of these 4 options, basically it should be a bulky ligand. If you want a linear product, it should be a bulky ligand, because if it's not a bulky ligand, there is a possibility of getting branched products as well, right? Because if there is bulkiness, if there's steric hindrance, then obviously the product that is going to be formed is linear. It's quite logical that way, right? So now obviously you can see in these 2, option number 3 and option number 4, they both seem to be sterically hindered and bulky ligands, right? But out of these 3 and 4, this one seems to be more bulkier, the option number 3, right? But let's say you are not very confident, that you might be thinking that in ferrocene there is, there is a hapticity of 5, so there might be extra rigidness or extra bulkiness which might be coming in ferrocene. So you might be confused between option 3 and 4, right? So what I generally do is, when I've narrowed down the questions to 2 options, I generally write down that question on the top, so that just in case in the end, if I have to come back to this question, I could do that, right? But now obviously from December examination onwards, it's going to be online. So you can, I hope the option comes of mark for review. So you can do the mark for review option as well. But if the question remains offline, then I generally write it on the top, like question number 61. So I have a little doubt over there. So I stop over there and I move to the next question, right? Don't spend a lot of time over there. Now the next question is the hydrocarbon having analogous structure to that of P4O6, right? So if you know the structure of P4O6, definitely go for this question, because then it becomes very easy. But if you're not sure about the question or about the structure of P4O6, then it does not make sense, right? Now fortunately, I remember the structure of P4O6, so it's something like this. I'll draw it over here. So we have a phosphorus, oxygen. It's like a benzene ring, kind of cyclic ring, 6-membered, right? And then we have again oxygen, phosphorus, oxygen, and like this, and then there's this oxygen. So you can see there are 6 oxygens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 4 phosphorus. So this is the structure for P4O6. Now you can see that phosphorus over here is trivalent, and if you see the oxygen over here, oxygen is divalent. Now there are 4 oxygens which are divalent, right? And there are how many phosphorus? 6 phosphorus which are trivalent. Okay, so all you have to know that if we are talking about divalent species, then CH2 you can say is a divalent species. CH2 is a divalent species. Okay, if you compare over here, if you see the options, and CH is a trivalent species, right? So there are 6 phosphorus which are trivalent species, so we have to have 6 mu CH2. Okay, we have to have 6 mu CH2. So if you see among these, we have 6 mu CH over here, right? We have 6 mu CH over here, and you have 4 oxygens which are divalent. So you have 4 CH2s over here, right? So we have 4 CH2s which correspond to 4 oxygens, and we have 6 CH carbons, which is basically designating the trivalent nature, right? Which is designating the trivalent nature. So the correct answer over here could be option number 3, right? Now we'll move on to the next question. So again, I'll again mark this question number 62 as well, because I have to check it again, because right now I'm looking for questions which are easily solvable, right? So we'll go to the question number 63. Now in the question number 63, as you can see, we have to match the items given below in 3 columns. Now these 3 proteins, this is a question from bio and inorganic chemistry, and these 3 proteins, they all are quite all the 3 proteins are quite popular proteins. Like these are very commonly studied in bio and organic chemistry. One is your myoglobin, one is hemocyanin, and then we have hemerythrin. So I hope all of you know that for myoglobin, this is very standard question. For myoglobin, it is O2 minus, right? For hemocyanin, it is a bridged intermediate like this. So A1 we have, A3 we have, and B1. So A3 and B1. Now you don't have to solve it completely. You have to see first where A3 and B1 is there. So A3 and B1 is there in 2 options. One is option number 1, as you can see over here, and then we have option number 3. So A3, B1. So automatically I generally used to cancel out the options so that they do not come into my mind. Okay, they do not play with my mind. So I'm left with options 1 and 3. Now again, now what I have to see? Now hemerythrin. So hemerythrin, option number C will definitely be C2. So now we are left with options 1 and 3. The next thing we have to do is the stretching frequency. Now the stretching frequency, I am very sure for myoglobin, it is O2 minus, and O2 minus has a stretching frequency of around 1105. This I have started from, like I have recommended a lot of reference books. So this is given in Hui, that it is 1105, right? So there is only one option, I think, with A3 and Z, because this is the correct explanation, A3Z. So you can see over here option 1 and among option 1 and 3, obviously option number 1 only has this A3Z. But again, over here, I know a lot of students get confused in the exam, in a hurry, that what exactly could be the possibility. This they can easily determine that what is the species to which the metal is coordinating. But sometimes they have, they have a difficulty in finding the stretching frequency. So again, over here we have identified that either the answer is 1 or 3. So again, we leave out these 3 questions. So you can see the first 3 questions that we have tried, we have the basic answer over here, but we might be having some confusion. So over here I write down below in the question paper that 61, 62, 63, I have eliminated at least 2 options in all of them. I have eliminated at least 2 options in all of them. 62, I have not given you the solution, because again, if you don't know the structure of P4O6, then there is no point. So that's why we were not, let's say we are not able to completely solve any question over here. Now you don't need to panic if you are not able to solve 3 questions. At least be confident that you have marked out 2 options. You have eliminated 2 options, right? Okay, so now let's move on to the next question. Again, this might be very confusing for some of you. So again, we'll not solve it completely. I'll tell you why. I'll give the solutions later on, but I just want to show you what my approach is in the exam, and that might be useful to you, right? So a solid sample of this complex, this is a EDTA complex, shows 5.6% weight loss at 120 degree in a thermogravimetric experiment, right? So in a TJ experiment, it shows weight loss of 5.6%. But over here, the catch is that they have not mentioned the amount of water they have taken. They have just written it N. And they have to identify the complex left after this weight loss. Okay, so if you have done experimental studies, like I had my master's project on where I used this thermogravimetric analysis analytical tool. So I know that around 120 degree or around 100 degree, there's a dip in the mass, which is corresponding to the loss of water. So basically all the water is lost. So definitely I'm sure that option number 2 is the answer over here. But again, over here, some students who have not studied TGA before, they might be again confused over here. So I'm taking that into consideration, right? I'm not taking my solving skills into consideration. I'm taking a general idea of how you have to solve the questions, right? So here also students might have a doubt, and this is where you start panicking. Like if your strength is inorganic chemistry and the first 4 questions, 4 markers, you have not got even a single correct answer, or you're not sure about the answer, this is where students tend to panic. So what I generally do is I like to sit back, look around if you have a good scenic view, and just relax for a while. Just give yourself a break, have a sip of water, do something, and then we start off. Okay. So again, till now we have 4 questions and we have not been able to correctly solve any one of them. Now consider the 2 sets of molecules. Let's move on to 65. So after a good break, after 30-40 second break and taking a few deep breaths, we finally go on to the question 65. So the question says that we have AlF6 3 minus, PF6 minus, SF6 and SiF6 2 minus, and it's asking the slowest ligand exchange in both the sets, in set A and set B. It is asking the slowest ligand exchange will take place over where, right? Now the first thing that should strike to you in set A is the oxidation states of the metals. Now in all the 3 cases, the oxidation states of these elements, the central atoms, is different. In AlF6 3 minus, it is basically 3 plus, right? Aluminium over here has 3 plus. Then if you talk about PF6 minus, we have P in plus 5 state. In SF6, S is in plus 6. And if you talk about SiF6 2 minus, silicon is in plus 4. Now it is very, very natural to think that if the ligand exchange is slow, then the oxidation state should be more, because if the oxidation state is more, that means the central atom is more electron deficient and the bonding is going to be stronger, right? And one more thing is that in all the 4 cases, the ligand is same, that is fluorine. So it only depends on the oxidation state. Now sulfur has the highest oxidation state, so obviously the bonding is going to be very strong. So definitely the ligand exchange of SF6 would be the slowest, right? And now you see over here, you don't even need to solve the set B. With set A itself only, you got the answer as option number 2, that is 65. So now you're sure that this is the answer. You don't have to go for set B. Okay. So this is one place, the examination center, where you have to, like, you don't have to let your ego come in between, right? Maybe you know the answer to set B as well, but you have to be smart. You have to work smart. For satisfying your ego, you have interviews to give. Okay, there your ego will be completely satisfied, where you have to give a detailed answer as to why you are giving that answer. But in the examination center, in an objective type question, nobody is going to ask you how you came onto the answer, right? So don't go and try to satisfy your ego. Just go for the second option, because you have got from the set A itself that the answer is SF6, and on the 4 options you can see that the SF6 is the only possibility. So option number 2, you don't have to solve the set B. Okay. And don't even try to think, some students have this, some aspirants have this problem that they don't trust their answer. So they try to verify the second option as well. This is good when you have time on your hands, but if you don't have time in your hands in the exam, you don't have to verify. You can do the verification part at the end, when you have solved all the questions, when you're sure that there's none question which is left, which I can give a try. Then when you're doing the revision of what all you have marked, at that point of time you can do the verification, but not when you are in a flow. You don't have to break the flow. Okay, so the correct answer is option number 2. So you have got finally one question correct. We are sure about this. Now the next question is that consider the following statements for europium 3+. Okay. Now generally when I go for the exam, I generally, in organic chemistry, I study coordination chemistry and organometallics like a little more detailed as compared to other sections. So I don't give much time to lanthanides and actinides except for the basic part, which, like the magnetism and everything. So in this question, let's say I don't have any idea about option C. It is saying consider the following statement for europium 3+. Okay. So yeah, so consider the following statement for europium 3+. So it's saying the position of sharp bands in UV visible spectra of its complexes depend heavily on the ligand environment. So for lanthanides, it's quite relevant that the sharp bands, they generally give sharp bands. Okay, it does not depend on the ligand environment as such for europium. So I'm sure that option number A is definitely correct. Okay. Yeah, sorry. So I'm sure that option number A is definitely correct. And just one second. Yeah. So option A is definitely correct. Now its ground state term symbol is 7F0. That is quite easy to find out because if europium 3 plus we talk about, so in europium 3 plus, this is basically, I generally like to write down the whole series. So lanthanum, no, not lanthanum, sorry. How do we start with this is, I just escaping out of my mind when we write the transition series. So we have europium, we have gadolinium. So europium basically is your this element that we need. Yeah, so I just remembered. So I use mnemonics for remembering the periodic table, especially the lanthanides. So this is the like, I can't tell you the mnemonic, it's quite funny. So I'll just write down over here. You can use whatever mnemonic that makes sense to you. Lanthanum, cerium, promethium, niobium, praseodymium, niobium, promethium, samarium, and then we have europium finally. Like over here we can write europium, right? So there's a trick for finding out the electronic configuration. It's a little tricky over here. So europium over here has this electronic configuration of 4f7 and 6s2, right? 6s2. So when you have europium 3 plus, so these two electrons in the 6s orbital will be removed and one electron from 4f orbital. So we'll be left with f6, right? So if you try and make the f6 over here, 1 2 3 4 5 6, right? And then we have, obviously we'll have one more orbital. So this has basically 6 unpaired electrons. So definitely if you try to find out the ground state term symbol, which is 2s plus 1, so 2 into, since we have 6, so 2 into 6 by 2 plus 1, so that will come out to be what, 7. And then if you calculate the momentum, orbital momentum, it will come out to be we'll just calculate over here, plus 3 plus 2 plus 1, then we have 0, then minus 1 minus 2, right? So we have a total of plus 3, right? So we have S, P, D, so 0, 1, 2, and for F we have 3. So this is definitely going to be 7F0, right? So we are sure about options A and B. Now let's look at the options. Let's say I have no clue. Okay, to be very honest, I have no clue about options C and D even now, right? So now we'll see among the options. So A and B, I'm sure are, sorry, just let me go to here. A position of sharp and UV visible spectra of its complex depend heavily. Okay, sorry, the answer option A is incorrect, to be honest, very sorry, because over here the positions of sharp bands and UV visible spectra of its complex depend heavily on the ligand environment. They do not depend. Okay, so I didn't read the whole question properly, and this is one mistake that you don't have to do, right? So you have to read the question carefully. So the position of sharp bands in UV visible spectra of its complexes depend heavily on the ligand environment, which is totally incorrect. They do not depend on the ligand environment. In general, they are sharp, right? So option A is incorrect and option B is correct. I have just this much information, but don't give up on the question. Sometimes you just go with the options and see, is it making any sense? So if you see over here, in 3 of the options, okay, in 3 of the options, in option number 1, in option number 3, and in option number 4, A is given as the correct statement. Okay, because again I'll go to the question. Consider the following statements. The set of correct statements asking, and we have already known as a fact that option A is incorrect. And in 3 of the options, okay, just one second, yeah. So in 3 of the options, as you can see over here, in option 1, 3 and 4, A is there. So definitely they cannot be the right answer. So the only possible option is option number 2. So this is the great thing about entrance exams, that even if you're not confident, if you don't have complete information about the topic, still you can get the answer to be absolutely correct. And that is why for this particular question, the answer was option number 2. Okay. So question number 67. Now the product of the reaction given below is, and this is the reaction. So these are the 4 options that are given to us, right? So it's the iridium complex, and what we have to see over here is, if you see the options, in one option you can see that this hydrogen is added. Over here also hydrogen is added, right? So you have to take hints from the option also. So over here also hydrogen is there, and in this option also hydrogen is there. Now what is the difference between the 4 options? This will help you in solving organometallic equations. Just go for the options first, that what is the exact difference in the structure of the options, so that will give you an idea as to how the mechanism is proceeding. So we have seen that the hydrogen is getting added to the metal, and the second thing is that there is definitely a formation of ketone like structure, as you can see over here, right? And in this also, now there's a direct attachment of the ketone and there's an indirect attachment of the ketone. So these are the two variable options. So first of all, what will happen is, now if you try to calculate the total 18 electron rule, if it satisfies the 18 electron rule or not. So this exactly is a 18 electron complex. So this over here is a 18 electron complex, and so first of all, you can see that some kind of oxidative addition is happening over here. So it has to remove one of the ligands to undergo, first it will undergo reductive elimination, and since cyclooctane is a bulkier ligand, so it will eliminate that and will undergo reductive elimination to form your IRCl PMe3 whole thrice. So it will form this IRCl PMe3 whole thrice, right? So now it's a 16 electron species, it can easily undergo oxidative addition because iridium over here is electron rich. Now out of the two sites, which side of the epoxide will it prefer to attack? Obviously it will try to attack the less hindered side due to steric reasons. So this iridium over here is going to attack the less hindered side of the epoxide, which will lead to the opening. So now you can see that the CO that is forming over here is not a direct attachment, it is an indirect attachment, right? The CO is not directly attaching because this iridium is first attaching to the carbon, and then this epoxide ring is opening. So iridium, then carbon, and then we have the CO bond over here, right? So it will be not a direct attachment. So first of all, let's remove the questions with direct attachment. So obviously option number 4 we can easily remove because it shows direct attachment, right? Now we are left with 1, 2, and then we are left with one more option, 1, 2, and 3 option, right? So among 1, 2, and 3, which one would be the correct answer? So once that has happened, once the epoxide has attached, so we will get basically CH2, right? Then we'll have a CO, right? Sorry, first we'll have a COH, right? Sorry, yes, first we'll have a COH, right? And then we'll have a methyl group attached to this, right? And this is a CH. Initially this will be formed, right? IR, CH2, CH, then we have OH and CH3. Now what is going to happen is something called as cyclometallation, where the hydrogen over here, right, the hydrogen over here, like agostic interaction, this hydrogen over here is going to bind to the iridium, okay? It's going to bind to the iridium like this, and this binding will obviously be at a position which is cis to it, not trans to it, right? So this will happen, and then finally this oxygen will donate its electrons over here to form a ketone, and this hydrogen will get attached to iridium. So now we have one more information, that the hydrogen and the CH2CO CH3 group should be cis to each other. So obviously option number 1 not a possibility. Now option number 2 is a possibility, and what is the other option? Other option is option number 3, but in option number 3 also, as you can see, it's a CO bond. So this also we can cancel out actually. So 3 and 4 were cancelled out earlier only. So we were left with option number 1 and 2. So among option number 1 and 2, it's quite obvious that the answer is option number 2, because over here the hydrogen is cis to it, right? Okay, so and you should always keep a track of the number of questions you have solved. So we are sure with question number 67. We are sure about question number 66, which fortunately we had no idea about, but still we were able to solve, right? Not no idea, but not a complete idea. And then we solved 65. So first 4 questions we were not sure, and then you can see how the trend changes. Once you got 1 correct, 65 we got correct, then 66 also we got correct, and 67 also. So now the confidence would have start building up. Now this is a question which was a tricky question in terms of language, okay? And generally I prefer that when a scientific examination is conducted, they should not twist the words, because they are looking for the concept, not exactly the English, right? So this was a question which kind of was very confusing, and the question says that the 31p NMR of cis PT this complex, cis platinum complex of I equal to half is this much, okay? And over here it's given that platinum is 33.8% abundance, okay? We have to find the 31p NMR spectrum. Now many of you might have seen this 1H. What does this 1H mean? That means it's a decoupled NMR spectra. That means that the hydrogen is not going to interact with your phosphorus. And it is given that platinum is 33.8% abundant with the spin of half. Okay, the NMR active form, okay, of platinum is 33.8% abundant, and its other isotopes are NMR inactive. Okay, so it is saying, what is it asking basically? That it is comprised with satellite peaks of a, so with satellite peaks. So obviously you know that since it is 33.8% abundant, it will show 2 satellite peaks since its spin is equal to half. So the spectra will look something like this, that will have this, then we'll have this, and then we'll have this. So since it's 33.8% abundant, so we'll have 66.2%. okay, I hope I am correct with the calculations. Yeah, 66.2%. the intensity of this peak will be 66.2, and then this will be divided among 33.8. so this will be around 16.9, right? This will be 16.9 and this will be 16.9. so these are the 2 satellite peaks over here which have been coming because of this 33.8% abundance of platinum. Then the 66.2 belongs to the phosphorus, which is not interacting with the platinum, right? Now a question says it is comprised with the NMR spectrum is comprised with satellite peaks of a. So thus it's saying that basically the satellite peaks are already there, which, and what else is there? So it is comprising with the satellite peak of a singlet. So there is one singlet over here, and then we have 2 satellite peaks. So the correct answer over here was singlet. But again, this is a very confusing question, and to be honest, if I have other options, I will try and mark those options rather than going for this question. So again, I'll put a circle around question 68, that I would not mark this question because this is quite confusing in its language, right? Now let's go to the next question. Now this is a very classic question, and the question says that the correct order of intensity of DD transitions in complexes of a 3D transition metal is what? What is the correct intensity? So all of you immediately, whenever DD transitions comes into your mind, 2 things should come into your mind. One is spin forbidden, right? One is spin forbidden, and then one is Laporte forbidden, right? Laporte forbidden. So these are the 2 principles which determine the intensity of of your DD transitions, right? So in all of the options, if you see cis, trans, and this in all of these complexes, the metal is in 2+ oxidation state. Even in this complex, and in this complex, it's in 2+ oxidation state. So the spin of the spin rule will be the same for both of them. Now let's talk about the Laporte rule. So Laporte rule is only applicable to molecules which are centrosymmetric in nature. So as you can see, option number 2 and 3, they are centrosymmetric, but the cis form, that is, if I draw it, the cis form like this, OH2, OH2, OH2 over here, and then OH2. So the cis form is definitely not a centrosymmetric molecule. So the Laporte rule is not applicable over here. So this is Laporte relaxed. So the spin rule is same for all the 3 cases, but over here the cis form is Laporte relaxed. So obviously the intensity of the cis form is going to be more. Now you check out the options before solving whether trans is more or the simple metal is more. You go with the options. Now you see that in all the 4 options there is only one option with cis with cis having the highest DD transition. So definitely the answer is option number 1. Okay. Now, to be very honest, I do not solve any questions from main group chemistry except for a few popular questions. So this is a question from main group chemistry where there's a reaction of your decaborane with the diethyl sulfur and acetylene. And to be very honest, main group chemistry is a very vast topic, and only a few selected reactions come from that. So in my opinion, it is totally useless actually to be preparing this. You have so much many more things to prepare. So I generally avoid main group chemistry except for a few topics like phosphazines, and there are some other topics as well. And you will see later on that there is a question, I think, on phosphazines as well. So I am going to leave out this question, and I am not even going to try it earlier because I have no clue about this question, right? So I'll leave that out. And as you can see, the next question is in fact about phosphazines. So the question says, in the compound N3P3F6, the geometry around nitrogen and phosphorus respectively are. Now this is basically asking you about Vesper theory as well as the structure of phosphazines. So as you will see, as the examination progresses, the CSR exam progresses, there will be more questions which will be combining 2 or more topics, right? So we'll quickly draw the structure for the cyclophosphazine. So this is something like this. Okay, alternate sulfur and phosphorus, and then we have double bonds in between, so it's like a inorganic benzene, you can say, right, borazenes or something like that. And then obviously over here the nitrogen valency is satisfied, so you have to accommodate six phosphorus over here, right? So the nitrogen valency is satisfied and you have to accommodate 6 phosphorus. So 6 phosphorus, how will you accommodate? Nitrogen valency is satisfied. Phosphorus, all of you know, can be pentavalent as well, right? Because it has 5 electrons in its valence shell, so it can be pentavalent. So all the 6 fluorines will go on the phosphorus. So 1, 2 like this, F, F, and then F, F. So nitrogen, basically now we'll apply the Vesper theory. We have to find the geometry of nitrogen and phosphorus, as you can see in the question. So if you apply the Vesper theory, nitrogen has 2 bond pairs and 1 lone pair. So its structure is going to be bent or planar in nature. So if you see, again, you don't have to go for the second option. There's only one option. No, there are 2 options in fact. This is planar and option number 4 is planar. Now we have to find out, obviously we have to find out what is the geometry of phosphorus. So phosphorus over here has 4 bond pairs and no lone pair, okay, because all the lone pairs are there's no lone pair, all of them are bonding pairs only. So there are 4 bond pairs, 2 with the fluorines and then 2 with the nitrogens. So 4 bond pair corresponds to tetrahedral, so definitely the answer is option number 2, right? So 71 also we got correct. Now let's move on to the next question. Pretty interesting, because over here you can outsmart the examiner. The question says that the number of 2 center 2 electron bonds of a molecule is related to n, where n is the valence electrons and n is the skeletal atoms, by x equal to 8n minus n upon 2. So for P4S3, the values of x, n and n respectively are. Now it's asking the values and the question seems to be very complicated. You have to find the 2 center 2 electron bonds and then you have to predict the structure for P4S3. But they have given you the formula. Okay, you have given you the formula x equal to 8n minus n upon 2. Now sometimes if you're lucky, among the 4 options they will give you 2 such options where they'll give you 2 such options or where you'll get this formula is going to be satisfied. But sometimes, like I was saying, if you're lucky, only one option would be satisfying this formula. So it's worthwhile to give a try whether you'll be able to solve this question or not using the formulas. But again, that will be basically a fluke, or that will be some smart skills that you'll be applying. So you are still not sure about the question. So we'll circle it, or we'll write over here question number 72 and we'll circle it over here as well to come back to this later if required. Okay. So all the questions where you can apply some smart tools, you should come back later. First, you should do the questions which you are thorough with or you're completely sure with. Now the next question is match the following complexes with their VO stretching frequencies. So all of us know that PF3 has the is a very good pi acceptor, and because the PF3 is a very good pi acceptor, it decreases the electron density on the molybdenum. So if the electron density decreases on the molybdenum, then the CO stretching frequency will increase because the CO bond will get stronger, right? Because molybdenum will donate less electrons to the pi anti-bonding of the CO. So the CO stretching frequency, the CO bond will get stronger because no electrons are there in the anti-bonding, because of which the stretching frequency will also increase. So we know that for PF3 the stretching frequency should be the highest. So the highest stretching frequencies in the options is what? 2055 and 2090. So you know that for A option the value should be 3. Now if you look at the correct options, there is only one option with option number 2, that is A3. So I mean, you don't have to, that's what I'm saying. Be smart, just from one option itself you got the answer, no need to go for the other options. Have confidence, have faith in your knowledge, right? So as you can see, rest is POMe3, PPH3 and pyridine. And if you want to actually really verify, you can go for the lowest one. Now pyridine, it's not even a pi acceptor, it's a donor ligand, right? So the stretching frequency will be the lowest. So the stretching frequency is lowest, that means 1746 and 1888, right? So D should be 4. So A3 and D4. So you have actually verified it quickly and you know that the answer is option number 2. Let's go with the next one. The VCN in FeCN6 3- and FeCN6 4- and VCO in CrCO3 NH3 whole thrice and CrCO6 are compared below. The pair with correct order is, okay, so you have to identify the stretching frequencies. So the greater the bond strength, the higher the stretching frequency. So first we'll go with FeCN6 3- and FeCN6 4-. So in FeCN6 3-, iron is in which state? Iron is in plus 3 oxidation state, and over here iron is in plus 2 electron oxidation state, right? So over here iron is more electron deficient, over here iron is less electron deficient. So if iron over here is more electron deficient, that means it will be donating less electrons to the Cn, which is a pi acceptor, so which is basically the anti-bonding. It's similar case to Cu also. So over here, since iron is electron deficient as compared to iron plus 2, the ferric ion is electron deficient, so this ferric ion will donate less electrons, so the Cn bond over here will be stronger in A as compared to in B. So A greater than B. So A greater than B, we have how many options? We have first and second option with A greater than B. Then the next statement is CrCO3 NH3, right? CrCO3 NH3. Now among CrCO3 NH3 and CrCO6, so NH3 all of you know is a sigma donor. It's a pure sigma donor. So obviously it is going to increase the electron density on the chromium, because of which the chromium will donate more electrons to the anti-bonding and reduce the bond strength or the stretching frequency. So in this case, D will have a greater stretching frequency than C. So D has a greater stretching frequency than C. So that means only this option satisfies the conditions: A greater than B and D greater than C. So the correct answer over here is option number 2. Right. So question 75, and this is an interesting question. So some of you might be thinking about the structure and immediately thinking that you should not go for this question. Technically, when you get questions like these, the correct statements out of the 4 options, you should not, you should avoid those questions until unless you are not completely sure about the answer, right? So over here it is given that they consider the following statement, and we have been given Fe4 2 minus, right? So all of us know that over here Fe is in plus 6 oxidation state, right? If you try to calculate the oxidation state, so this is a very important thing, that Fe is in plus 6 oxidation state. Now the question says that these are the 4 options that is given, and which of them are correct. So it is a very strong oxidizing agent. That will be absolutely true, because iron is first of all in plus 6, that is it's in its plus 6 oxidation state. So definitely it will be severely deprived of electrons, so it will readily accept electrons and thereby oxidize the reagents. So it will be a very good oxidizing agent, right? Then isomer shift. So over here, obviously if we compare it to Fe plus 3, the number of d electrons in Fe plus 6 is going to be less, right? The number of electrons. So definitely it is going to be more negative. So this is the concept of Mohs-Bar. I hope you know that isomeric shift. For iron it's different, and for tin complexes it is different, right? So these are the 2 main complexes that you have to do, iron and tin complexes. And in iron complexes, what happens? The d electrons are less, and if the s electrons are not taken into consideration, if you only take d electrons, because in both of these cases the 4s will be empty, right? So if you take d electrons into consideration, this will have Fe plus 6 will have less d electrons, so it is going to be more negative. So option number D is also true. Now among A and B, all of you know that when we talk about highly electron deficient reagents, or like over here iron plus 6, so they cannot be stable in acidic conditions. They can be stable in very basic conditions, but in acidic conditions they easily get protonated. So basically the hydrogen gets added and they get reduced, right? So they get easily reduced in acidic conditions. So definitely I am quite sure that the pH range will not be 0 to 14, and this statement makes sense, B, C, D. So among this, the correct answer is option number 2, but I will never go for this question because I am not sure. With my basic knowledge of chemistry, I'm trying to predict that it would be unstable in acidic conditions. So with that perception, I'm marking this question. So I'm not very sure about it. So again, over here, again, I'll write 75. That if I'm, you have to do only 25 questions. First of all, please remember this out of 60 questions. So don't go for questions which you're not sure about. First, go with the questions that you're 100% sure about. And then if still you are not able to meet the criteria of 25 questions, then you come back to these questions where you are doubtful. Okay. Now this is a question from your inorganic chemistry. Okay, and this is, to be honest, you'll have to do some thinking over here, right? You'll have to do some thinking over here. So for the time being, I'm going to skip the question number 76. If later on I feel like, I'll come back to it, because honestly there are many questions which like we are doing it together. So there are many questions which are doubtful, and we are almost there up to the answer, right? So this question number 76 from coordination will require some kind of thinking. So we do not have that time, because let's say already some amount of time has passed, right? And we have to go for short questions which are quite easy. Now again, this is a question from inorganic chemistry, the main group part, where it's saying the reaction of B2H6. Over there it was decaborane, over here they have given B2H6. So again, I do, to be very honest, do not go deep into the main group chemistry equations. So I'll skip this question. I'll not come back because I don't have any idea about this question. 77 I'm skipping totally. Now the question number 78, the ligand that binds strongly to nickel center in 2,2-bipyridine nickel 0 complex is, okay. So it's saying that the ligand that binds strongly to this nickel 0, this is very important. That means that nickel is electron rich. So it will bind very strongly to a complex which is a very good pi acceptor. Now among the 4 options, if you see, this methoxy is an electron donating group. So basically it will increase the electron density. Okay, so this nickel basically will interact with this double bond over here, right? So definitely this one is electron rich and nickel is also electron rich. So OMe will not be the answer. Similarly, CH3 also, this will be also electron dense, and OAC will also be electron dense. Okay. Now over here what will happen, due to resonance, this double bond will not be that electron dense because it can resonate over here as well as here. So over here the accepting ability of the double bond will be the most, right? And this will be, or you can say this is electron deficient and this metal is electron rich, so they will bind very strongly. So the only plausible answer over here is option number 1. Okay. So now let's move on to the next one. Now this is basic analytical chemistry question, and this is actually very easy. You should be very well versed with it. So magic number, all of us know, is related to the shell model nucleus. Okay, this is very common, and your liquid drop model of nucleus basically is from nuclear fission. Okay, so if you have studied basic nuclear chemistry, you should have this idea. So we will go with the first 2 options itself, and I think many of you do know that actinides, all actinides are radioactive in nature, right? Because they are very heavy atoms, and that's why they disintegrate very easily. So we are very well versed with options. So A1, okay, sorry, A4, and magic number is A4, and then B is 1. So A4, B1, if you see, there's only one option, option number 1. And just to verify, C2, C should be radioactivity. So C3 and D2. So this makes total sense. So 79. So you see there are questions which you can solve in within 10 seconds and you are 100% sure about them. So why waste your time on questions, even though you know, let's say even though the coordination chemistry question that I skipped this one, even though I know the answer, but I know that it will require me 3-4 minutes to deduce the answer. So why do I have to do the questions which I am 100% sure about, and which will basically, which I can do in lesser amount of time. Okay, so don't get basically excited about questions you know about. Okay, if you know they are lengthy, they are like in physical chemistry, we'll come across some questions which are very lengthy, which you might be very well versed with the formulas, but you have to skip it. That's what will give you the advantage. Okay. So now let's move on to the next question. Again, you have to find the cluster type. So for the time being, I'll again like I know the concept, but again I'll not attempt it for the time being. Now the next question, now we have started with the organic part. So in the organic part, we are adding phenyl isothiocyanate and we have NH2, right? Or NH2 over here. So basically it's Edmond degradation and you have to predict the products. So first of all, what is going to happen is that this phenyl isothiocyanate will react with the lone pair on the present on the NH2. So phenyl isothiocyanate will be something like this, N double bond C double bond S, and the lone pair on the nitrogen over here. DPI is acting as a weak base, like you can say as a weak base. So what will happen, this lone pair of electrons will attack on this carbon, right? And once the attack takes place, this bond over here will go to the nitrogen. So finally we'll have PH NH. Okay, one of the hydrogens from the NH2 will go to this NH, and then we'll have C double bond S, and then this NH2 group will be attached. Okay, so I'll just erase this off. So the NH2 group over here will be attached like this, right? This NH2 group will be attached. Now what will happen is this sulfur is going to attack the electrophilic center. So this sulfur, what is going to do, it's going to attack this CO bond. This O minus will go, and then this O minus will come back, and this whole group will leave, right? This whole group will leave. So as you can see, the group which is leaving, so there will be product A and there will be product B. So you can see the product B only in 2 options it's aliphatic in nature, in rest 2 it's cyclic. So we have to go with either option 1 or option number 4. Now in option 1 and 4, what is the difference? What is the basic difference? Okay, the basic difference is actually you can just go with the B product. You don't have to even go with the cyclic product, because in cyclic product you have to number and you have to see whether the ring is forming or not. In both of these cases, you have to just go with the acyclic product. So in the acyclic product, you can see this carbon over here is below the plane. There is only one single carbon, and in this option number 1, you can see it is a isopropyl group, whereas over here it's a simple methyl group. Okay, you might be saying that the stereochemistry has changed, but it's in fact not changed. It is the same only. They have just reversed the product, right? So among this, option number 4 is the correct answer. You don't even have to solve for A, because you see from B only, from the aliphatic product only, you got the answer. Okay. Now this is NMR question, one of my favorites, and this you should be solving very, very quickly, right? So what is the data given to us? The data that is given to us is 4 signals in the range in the carbon 13 NMR. Okay, there are 4 signals, and there are 2 doublets between 6.8 and 8.5. So this region belongs to the aromatic region and the NMR spectra, and the stretching frequency is also given to us as 1724 centimeter inverse. So from this, 2 doublets between 6.8 to 8.5. Always remember that if you get 6.8 to 8.5, the compound is definitely ipso para substituted, right? So if we talk about this carbon, let's say this is the ipso, then this is the para. So ipso para substituted carbons only have 2 doublets, because the hydrogens over here, this hydrogen and this hydrogen, similarly I'll label them 1 and 1, and then this hydrogen which is 2 and this hydrogen which is 2, they will have the same chemical shift. So we'll get 2 doublets and 2 signals, 2 doublets. So that is why it is definitely ipso para disubstituted. So definitely option number 1 cannot be the answer, because over here you will not get 2 doublets, okay, or you won't get 2 signals. Similarly in option number 3 also you won't get 2 signals. So we are left with option 2 and option number 4. Now in option 2 and 4 you have to see the stretching frequency. So both of them are ester bonds. Now for ester, generally the stretching frequency is around 1740, generally, like on an average, and over here the stretching frequency is given 1724. That means it cannot be option number 4, it can only be option number 2. And why the stretching frequency is less? Because it is in conjugation with the phenyl ring. So because of that, this CO bond gets the partial double bond character, because of which we get 1724 rather than 1740. So the correct answer over here is option number 2.